Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Shield,
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
and this is Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. It's lovely to be here with you, and we have a wonderful topic today. This is one of Benjamin's favorite subjects, which is why I chose it. I thought it would be wonderful for all of you to hear his thoughts about curiosity and how it didn't kill the cat. Or at least it won't kill your dates. So I am so excited to be here, baby. And let's just dive in and talk about how curiosity can be the key to connection and having second dates and third dates and beyond. All right, so let's get started.
Well, first, the importance of insatiable curiosity is to deepen the communication with the person you're sitting across from, and to create a connection. And it has to be this insatiable curiosity that you really want to navigate more about this person. And you want to do it in a certain order because you don't want to ask a heavy question like, what's your relationship with your parents, first. So it's about vulnerability, where you may even share something about yourself which invites the other person to speak about themselves. And this insatiable curiosity doesn't have to be like interview questions. It can be this natural flow of sharing something, seeing how it's received and responded to, and then seeing if you could up the level of emotional vulnerability, even that next step. And after, by the end of the first date, even if you know that you don't want to have a second date, it will be an extraordinary evening. Because dating is magical, because you could sit across from someone who a few minutes before was a total stranger and begin to have a more and more intimate conversation, learning about a person who you otherwise would never have met. So ideally that it would lead to a second date, there'd be interest on both parties. But even if there's not, you leave feeling better. You leave feeling smarter. You leave feeling like you've really made connection with another human being.
So I know when I was dating, one of the biggest mistakes I made was that all I did was talk about myself. Because I thought I needed to be interesting rather than interested. Mistake for much of my life. I think that it wasn't until I read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that I was like, oh, duh, like people want to talk about themselves. They don't necessarily want to hear about how fascinating I am. They want to fascinate me.
Right, and some people default by not asking questions and letting the other person just go on and on and on. As I joked about one time with us, I said that there's a 12-step program for people who go on and on. It's called On and On and On. And some people are, some guys in particular may be very shy to ask questions, or they may be very respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been criticized, over my dating years, that I didn't ask enough questions, and women were offended.
Well, you don't really ask questions.
What I do is sit back and wait for these puzzle pieces to come to me. And I find what's important will come forward in natural conversation. But it didn't come across that way to many of the women I was dating.
Really? What would they say to you?
Well, they were afraid that I wasn't interested because I wasn't asking the questions.
Was it a common criticism?
Often.
Really?
Yeah.
What would women say to you?
Well, they say, well, you don't ask any questions. And, for me, it seemed that if I just kind of laid back and had conversation back and forth, that important things would start coming out. and I wouldn't have to reach for them.
But you
And
always tell the women to be insatiably curious.
I do. And if I were dating now, all these years, decades later, um, I would be much more insatiably curious
Mm-hmm.
because I realize how much it means to the other person
Mm-hmm.
to show a real interest rather than just sit back and just wait for things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was some emotional growth.
Yeah. Well, and my emotional growth was to not talk so much about myself and to be more curious about other people. It's a funny thing dating because we don't really know a lot of these things. And they're skills that need to be learned for many of us and practiced and perfected. It's not just being curious. Some people may, listening to this, may think, well, I do ask questions and, I am curious, but it's also, as you said, the order of the questions and the quality of the questions we're asking.
And the sincerity of the
Mm-hmm.
question.
And the sincerity. One of the things we talk about in my 12-week emotionally naked dating program is how you don't want to go on a date and be like a stone skipping across the surface of a pond, asking random questions that have no connection to each other. But, oh, where did you go to school? How many siblings do you have? Where do you work? Where did you go to college? Whatever, things like that, just one random question after another. What we suggest with the women in the program is to take one subject and go deeper. So maybe we could model that for a second,
That would
if
be
you don't,
great.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So I noticed in your profile you wrote that you are a kind of body worker, or you do a kind of manual therapy, physical therapy. It was kind of vague. I'm really curious about that.
Call it manual therapy, which may sound very vague because I've studied so many things, and you take what's good and you leave the rest and you make it your own. So I don't like to go by any title because it would confine what I do and
Mm-hmm.
misrepresent what I do. But I love what I do. I'm passionate about it, and I've done it for over 40 years, and I hope I never retire.
So when I read manual therapy, I thought that maybe you were like a fancy massage therapist, not to be. So I'm really curious when you chose that phrase. What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking that it would lead to more conversation.
Oh,
That there's no way to really describe it, in a profile.
hmm.
And have you ever do you ever get body work?
It's so funny. I have not gotten much body work, and by and large, I've been very healthy. I don't have many issues, but I did fall off a horse when I was a kid at summer camp. So I do have some residual pain from that. They told me it was going to get worse as I got older, and they were right.
Well, maybe as we get to know each other more, I can see what I can do to help that.
Really? Is
Yeah.
there stuff that you could do for my shoulder that might help?
Well, there may be, and we'll see what's going on. And I'd love to ask you questions about that.
Uh-huh.
And maybe on our second date.
Uh-huh. That sounds kind of sexy. So we took one question and we made a whole conversation out of it. And this is what we encourage the women to do in our course. If a man, maybe she doesn't love fly fishing, I always think of that for some reason as an example, but there are men who really find solitude and beauty in fly fishing. It can be an art. If you saw, what was the Robert Redford movie? A River Runs Through It, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that the name of it?
It was with Brad Pitt.
Oh, was that Brad
Yeah,
Pitt?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So not Robert Redford, but Brad Pitt reminds me sometimes of a young Robert Redford. Anyway, um, I was curious. Uh, it was such a beautiful film, and it was a subject that if somebody had said to me, "Oh, fly fishing on a date," I would have inwardly rolled my eyes. But once I saw the film and I saw these beautiful images of him, waving
Right.
the rod back and forth in the sun on the water and glinting off of the what do you call it? The not the reel, the not the thread, but the
The
twine. What do you
line.
call it? The line,
Uh,
the fishing line. Yeah, it's a little early for me still. I might need another cup of coffee. But it was so beautiful, and I could just imagine if I met somebody who on a date who loved fly fishing, I would run with it.
right. And it's not just running with it to placate the other person,
Right.
to make it, but you will leave saying that, as you just said, I had no idea that there is so much beauty in
Mhm.
something that I just thought was kind of a throwaway waste of time.
Yeah, or mountain biking or off-roading. I mean, there are sports that men are passionate about that first of all, I've never met anyone who does those sports. But if I was curious about that, if a man had a passion for something and I was willing to explore it, I could learn about that sport, maybe even become interested. It might not be something I would ever want to do, but I could go and sit and watch and support a partner in doing those things and maybe find some enjoyment just in watching my partner enjoy those sports.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a Harvard study I was reading about in medium.com, and one of the things that they said, it was secondhand, so I haven't looked up the study myself, but what the author said was that the thing that made people most attractive was curiosity and asking questions.
And if you ask questions that brings up the passion of the
Mm-hmm.
other, whether it's mountain biking or fly fishing or their career,
Mm-hmm.
it brings passion into the conversation, into the
Right.
date. And that's what people are looking for, passion. And when one thinks about all the boring dates and the serial dating, it's often passionless evenings.
Right.
So if one can stimulate the conversation with their own passion and eliciting passion from the other person, that's a out of the park date.
It really is. They said that in this Harvard study, they said that they had two different groups, and I may be getting the numbers wrong, but there were 15-minute conversations between a man and a woman, and they told one person of the couple to ask, let's say, 15 questions over the course of this 15-minute conversation. And then in the second pairing, they said, ask 4 questions. And almost across the board, the couples where they asked 15 questions, there was much more connection, and there were many more second and third, second dates, and a desire, the pairs felt much more connected than when they only asked 4 questions.
Yeah.
And what they found, like you said earlier, was it was very important, the order of questions, not diving in right from the start and saying, well, tell me, what do you love most about fly fishing? Like, why do you do it?
Yeah.
But starting with, oh, I saw that you love fly fishing. How often do you go?
Mm-hmm.
Something simpler, and then going deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah. And it's so important not to be judgmental with an answer, because that just stops conversation. So if someone says, let's just say that the person sitting across saying, I only eat raw food, raw anything. And instead of saying, wow, that's really weird, or I can't imagine that. I read that's not healthy. But simply saying, tell me more. Tell me more. And by that person telling you more, you may truly understand, like, oh, I get it. That's why he does it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I think that asking the right questions in the right way elicits respect for the person.
Mm-hmm.
Because you begin to learn why they do something, how they do it, and why they're passionate about it.
It also shows the other person that you're open-minded, that you're open to discovering new things, new ways, that there's room for them in a relationship with you and in a conversation with you. So it opens up so many other levels of connection when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and some guys feel that if a woman asks all the questions, that the relationship, that's great. We're communicating. She's asking questions, I'm answering them.
Yes.
And that doesn't work either.
No.
And so the guy may feel like, wow, that was a really good date. I was asked a lot of questions, but it has to be mutual.
Yes, it has to be mutual. So we have a few comments from listeners. Olga wrote, what would you recommend when it comes to getting to know someone? I don't know what to say, and they don't know what to say.
Well, sometimes it begins with something um, so real, like, coming into a date saying that, wow, I was really looking forward to this date. And I have to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous. And, they may say, wow, I have to say I'm a little nervous too. And it starts a conversation, and it could be, what can I do to make you less nervous? Or just that little piece of vulnerability, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can also, Olga, you might want to have a few questions that you bring with you. And, rather than bringing that list of interview questions, there are all kinds of lists of questions you can find online. But I would think of ones that are very comfortable to ask, that are a little out of the box, so that you stimulate unique conversation. You might say to a man, what are 3 things you would want someone to know about you? And the 3 things they would choose would say a lot about who they are, right? Because they could choose anything. But 3 things that you would really want someone to know about you. So that's an easy question. Or what is something, if you had a day, like a free day all to yourself, how would you spend that day? What would you love to do? And if you were to share one activity with, a partner or someone that you were seeing, what would be that one activity? And then you could start to deepen any of those things. You could start to go deeper and deeper. And then we have one of our coaches in our emotionally naked dating program. She's lovely. And she used to ask a man, what is something you would love to do on a Sunday? What is one thing that you would just love to do on a Sunday? And then the man would describe it, and she would say, oh, wow, you just planned our first date. So stuff like that. It was really clever, the way that she would take something like that and sort of lead the guy and then bring it together and create connection. That's another very important part of communication, is to try not just to talk about things objectively, subjectively, but also to bring the two of you together through the conversation. So, oh, I've never done that before, or the way you describe that, it makes it sound like so much fun. I would love to try that sometime. If a man was talking about scuba diving or where do they wear wetsuits? Going surfing. you know, you might not have ever thought about surfing before or scuba diving, but if a man started to describe his passion for one of those sports, you might say, wow, you know, if you ever felt inclined to give me a scuba diving lesson, I would love to try it. And it's then you don't just have this conversation where you're asking questions, but then you bring it together. Or wow, you know, I've never been hiking in Malibu, and it sounds like you go there all the time. And I've often wanted to go. I would love to go on a hike in Malibu. So already you're planting seeds for another date, and you're giving a suggestion so that this man is like, oh, okay, if I ask her on a second date, she won't reject me. And I know she wants to go hiking in Malibu. So there you go. It's really a good thing to make it easy for a man to ask you on a second date. And I find that the women who get asked out more on second dates, third dates, fourth dates, they're planting these seeds. So they're not just having random conversations, but they're leading the man on to do that.
Yeah.
It makes it easier.
Yeah. And there are the cases where a guy may just sit there and talk about himself for
Yes.
like an hour and a half. And it leaves no space for conversation, for questions. And what may be appropriate is to lean forward, even touch the person's hand and say, may I pause you for a second? You know, I love hearing all about you. And I wanted to ask you if there's anything you'd like to know about me.
Well, and that's a little broad, babe. I think that that's a really sort of showstopper question because it's so open. And it might even be, if I could say, more effective to make it a little bit more specific, like to say, oh, you know, I loved hearing about your travels to Southeast Asia. And I actually went with my grandmother to you know, Hong Kong back in the day, way before people were going. She and I actually went to Hong Kong together, you know, and it was an absolutely amazing trip. Is there, you know, I'd love to share a little bit about that. So if you ask too broad a question, or what do you want to know about me, I think that's so broad that a guy is kind of going to be a little lost with that. So if you do pause a man, it's very important to prompt him a little bit and guide him.
Yeah. And it can be very important to pause him and prompt. Otherwise, it's just, and we've heard it many times from women going on a date and saying, all he did was sit there and talk about himself.
Well, men would have said the same thing about me. So, you know, I hear women say that and I'm like, guilty. You know, I when I was young, my mother died. My grandmother was so gracious. She took my brother and me on wonderful trips. And so I just thought I was the most fascinating world traveled person on the planet. And I wanted to talk about those, or I talked a lot about that. It was like, it's really embarrassing now, but I had a repertoire of fascinating stories. And one of the things that's, I think, is really important is, you know, I said earlier, it's more important to be interested than interesting. And so I could have offered those stories as, you know, adjuncts to what they were saying, were offered, oh, you know, wow, I went to Hong Kong too. And, you know, and sharing a little bit, what did you think about da, 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 but created more of a dialogue than a monologue and a show and tell. So here's another comment from one of our listeners. I get very irritated with men who don't know how to have a conversation. I don't feel connected and walk away. They are a dud. My bad, I guess. So here I am.
Right.
Well, I think it's very, very important also for some of you, if this keeps happening over and over again, it is very important. Some women in our course, they will say, I'm such a good listener, and the man never asks me anything about myself. It is important to remember that when we're talking with friends, we don't sit there and wait for our friends to ask us questions. It's conversations are much more relational. So your friend may share something, and then you'll offer your perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's important to teach people how to ask questions. Like simply because a good man wants to make a woman happy. And if a woman says to the gentleman, even on the first date, it would make me so happy if, I'd love to share some things about myself. It would make me so happy if you asked some questions. And a guy really, most men just want to know how to make a woman happy. So men are teachable. Many men are teachable.
They're teachable, and it is not necessarily in the nature of men to ask questions. Right. Some do, if they grew up with a lot of sisters or female friends, right? Mm-hmm. They may be more in the habit of asking friends, or if they were raised by a single mother, they may have developed that skill. But as you've said so many times, a lot of men they feel that they're prying. Right. So it's important, like you said, for a woman to open that door and say, it's okay to ask me questions. Yeah. I'd love for you to learn more about me. Yeah. And it would really be wonderful. One thing that's very important is how you say that to a man. Mm. Right? You don't want to say, you're not asking me any questions. Like, why don't you ask me questions? How would you say it, honey?
Oh, that, I really am enjoying getting to know you. And I'd love for you to get to know me even more. It would make me so happy if you'd ask me questions. And I'd love to hear the questions and give you my answers.
And if I were on a date with you and I said, how come you're not asking me any questions? Like, we've been here for an hour and a half, and it would really be nice. I would like it if you'd ask me some questions. How would you feel if I said it like that?
Well, it would feel a little bit of shaming, and shame is the worst thing a man can feel. Respect is the greatest thing a man can feel.
So why would it feel shaming if I said it that way? Like why aren't you asking me any questions?
Well, it's like I did something wrong. I haven't been doing something right. And so, as opposed to, it would make me so happy, if you, I'm really getting to enjoy getting to know each other. It would make me so happy if you would ask me the questions things you may want to know about me. I'd love to share them with you.
And the reason why that would be shaming, if I said it that way, is because it's negative, mm-hmm. right? I'm saying, why aren't you asking me any questions? Right. Or how come you don't ask questions about me? You've been talking a lot about yourself. It would be nice if you'd ask me some questions too, which is the way many women would say it. And that would be negative and down-putting, and a man would feel like he had done something wrong or that he had failed. And if you state it in a positive way, in an encouraging way, then he wouldn't feel ashamed. He would feel encouraged and invited, and then he would be like, oh, I can do that. Right. And so it would be much more encouraging.
And the questions that he'd be bringing up would be much more interesting, because if a man were shamed and said that, told something in a negative way, like scolding, the questions that are going to follow that would be two-dimensional questions. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, how's your day?
Because he'd be trying to navigate the shame.
Yeah.
And there would be no playfulness, no fun, no, energy. It would be very deflating, and that would actually hurt the date more. So I really want to make this very clear to the women who are listening. You don't want to say, how come you're not asking me any questions?
Yeah. And what you just said about having something playful, humorous. I really want to emphasize that because what both partners are looking for in a long-term relationship or forever, happily forever after relationship is playfulness,
Yeah.
is having fun. And if it's so serious, and with the first date, men and women can extrapolate what it's going to be like, 5 years and 25 years later. So if there's playfulness in the beginning, even with questions like, "You're kidding me! Tell me about that. That's incredible," or "That's the strangest thing I've ever heard. Please tell me more about that." Yeah, there's playfulness,
Yeah.
and it elevates the conversation and the connection.
Beautiful, honey, beautiful. So more, let's see here. So another listener said, "Oh, that's so true. I have been practicing asking about their passion. It opens the door for never-ending talks about the topic." I am dating a guy who is passionate about skiing and I have never done it. He offered to teach me. That's so
Oh,
beautiful. Thank you for
great.
sharing that. Wow, really, really wonderful. And Olga asked again, what's the difference between having a dating conversation versus all other conversations?
Well, in a dating conversation, you really want to see if you want a second date.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to know enough about that person to really see, is this someone that I have respect for, or there's some attraction, or fascination. And so the questions are to navigate that, to see if there's a second date. You went on a lot of first dates, and no second dates before, almost no second dates before you and I met. Um, um, and I think with what you know now, you'd probably would have had more second dates, just because you could find a way to navigate into what's fascinating and what you would respect about that person.
Can I say I doubt it?
Okay, good, please.
Yeah, I just didn't find very many men who were, I might have had better dates and they may have been more interesting and all. I may have even made some friends. There were very few men who had the level of consciousness that I was looking for. And you know me, I'm like that. Like that's something I really wanted a man who had done his work. In my lifetime, in my life, I'm trying to think about the number of men that I've met who are truly not just conscious, woke, present, emotionally available. There's so few. I mean, there's just so few people. It's, a lot of people think that they are, and not many people really walk the talk. So, all right. And something else I would say to Olga is, Olga, all conversations, what we're teaching, we hear this over and over and over again from our clients, that everything we teach in our 12-week course and about dating really does apply to everyone.
Right.
The real difference with a date is that you're trying to create a romantic spark and a romantic connection, not just an emotional connection. So that's the difference. That would be the main difference in a date, right, honey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Olga says, I know how to talk to my girlfriends, but how do I talk to a man? Great question.
Well, if you really want to make a connection with a man, the three things that a man, or three of the things that a man truly needs, is respect. Just saying, oh my gosh, I have so much respect for how you show up every day at that job. That's extraordinary. Gratitude. I so appreciate you picking the restaurant tonight. It was a great. And mirroring his masculinity back to him. Like, wow, it takes a real man to do that. or wow, are you flexing your bicep, or is that just so re- mirroring back his masculinity to him. Those three things, and we could probably think of more, but those are three of the most important things that a man could hear to spark interest in romance.
Yeah, and Olga, it's so important to really understand men and male psychology, what men need from us as women, in the same way that we want a man to romance us, tell us we're beautiful, make us feel feminine. Men want those things too. They want to feel masculine. They want women. We don't have to be head turners. We don't have to be stunningly beautiful. I mean, that's wonderful if you've been gifted with beauty and all, but any woman can bring out a man's masculinity. Any woman can if she really knows how to do it. In fact, a few years ago when we were still living in LA, we went to a party, and a Christmas party, and I was just practicing on men. I thought, okay, I teach this stuff.
Right.
Let's see how good I am at it. And I went to this party, and I spent the entire time just talking to random men and really building up their egos and not even caring if they asked me a single question about myself. I just wanted to practice talking to them and making them feel masculine. And I talked to this one man. He was an older gentleman, quite introverted and serious. And by the time, our conversation ended, we'd made this really beautiful, deep connection about his work and his life. He told me things I'm sure he doesn't tell everybody. And another man, we talked for so long and connected, his girlfriend or wife, I think it was his wife, and she even knew Benjamin and knew that I was Benjamin's wife. And she came and grabbed him away from me because we'd been talking too long. And when we left the party, he reached out. And when I was leaving, and said, it was so nice meeting you and connecting with you. So, it's fun to just practice this on every man you meet and start learning how to really go deep and draw people out. And parties and gatherings are wonderful ways to do this and really get good at it. Lisa wrote, I love your story, sweet communication and advice, Benjamin and Lisa. How would you suggest handling a first meeting with a man who used old photos and he's heavier and older than his profile photos?
Oh, good question. Good question.
Well, first of all, I think the secret ingredient to anything to do with men and dating is compassion, and to understand that as much as you may feel in that moment like, wow, I've really been duped, and your first the very first feeling you have is, oh my God, this is a waste of time, and how do I get out of here? The first thing is just to take a deep breath and have compassion, because somebody who is being deceptive, I want to share a story, actually. So I had a woman, and she was in the military, who came to see me. This is when I was back doing one-on-one coaching. And she came in, and I said, well, let's look at your existing profile and pictures. And when I saw her photos, I said, well, how recently were these taken? I said, it looks like these might be a couple years old. And what she hadn't really realized was she had been injured, and she had put on a lot of weight. And she didn't think it was as obvious in the pictures as it actually was. She was kind of in denial. And she said when she went home that night, she just felt horrible. She wrote to me and she said, look, I'm not ready to move forward with coaching because it was really a wake-up call when you asked me about the pictures, and I didn't realize how much I need to lose weight before I would feel comfortable going out and dating. So she herself didn't see it the way someone else did. So we never know. I know I've put on some weight lately. I've stopped going to the gym and I got on the scale, and the scale doesn't lie. And, I can look good on camera, but I probably don't see those extra pounds in the way, you see them. And so I just avoid looking at myself naked in the mirror. And I know I look good on Zoom, but sometimes we're just not objective about ourselves. So it's having a little bit of compassion, maybe spending 30 or 40 minutes with this person, and then being able to look at your watch and say, oh my God, the time has flown. And, it was very nice meeting you. I do have some things I need to take care of this afternoon or this evening before work tomorrow. And I really do need to get going, but thank you for coming out. And then when you get home, you just send a very polite message, a text, and just say, thank you so much. It was very you. I can see that I'm not the right match for you, and I wish you the best in your search. But I wouldn't get into saying to somebody, oh, you're much heavier or you're much older than your photos. It's something that you just have to be prepared for. In dating, it happens. Unfortunately, it just happens. Carrie, hello, hello.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. So what's the best way to approach it first date when they told you something very intimate about an old girlfriend? And I'd rather not hear details. Although you don't want to do anything shaming, should I just forget it?
Oh, well, first you want to see if it becomes a habit. If he's dwelling on old relationships, either the good things or the bad things, that it may be difficult, if someone is dwelling on that, to be the recipient of just hearing those stories.
Well, and for the sake of curiosity, you just might get curious and say, wow, I'm curious, what made you want to share that with me? You can just be curious and just say, wow, that's deep, and that's something that happened between you and an ex. I'm quite curious what made you want to share that.
That's
and
great.
Just ask.
That's really good.
Something I was realizing the other day is that it's just how many stories we make up about situations and people, the things people say. And we're always, as they say in Landmark Forum, we're meaning making machines. Our brains are just making up stories like, why did he say that? And I don't, that wasn't something I want to hear about. But maybe there was a real reason behind why that man told you what he did. And it could open up a whole other conversation. So I wouldn't just think, oh my God, that was, why did he tell me that? I don't want to hear that. That's too much too soon. There might be a real reason underneath it why this man felt compelled to say it. And only he knows. Let's go to, my screen froze. What did I do? I'm back. I'm glad you made it back. Olga said, you are both very unique, wise people. Well, thank you very much. Carrie said, I would like to know the best way to handle a first. Oh, okay. We went through this. We're just going through some comments here. What happened to me? And the look on my face said what I was feeling. I chose compassion, spent an hour and a half with him, and he provided me with a good job lead where I worked for 10 years.
Oh.
Whoa. Well, there you go. There you go. Beautiful. What an amazing outcome. That's really wonderful. You just never know where where these dates and these conversations will lead. Yeah, well, we want to thank everybody for showing up, for listening, for supporting us. It means the world to us. Really, we don't take this lightly. We know how valuable your time is. Please, this has been Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. This would be the right male mind right here. I love, love, love this male mind. I think this is the most beautiful mind I've ever found in my life. And I love hearing your thoughts, honey. And I thank you so much for doing these broadcasts with me and for sharing your thoughts.
Oh, it's fun, and it's my pleasure.
Oh, you are the sweetest thing in the whole world. Please, please, please tell everyone you know about our broadcast. Your sisters, your brothers, your aunts and uncles, and your cousins, your girlfriends, your guy friends, your kids, your sons and daughters. We really need to start looking at dating, love, connection in a much more beautiful way. Dating can be an extraordinary experience if you choose to make it that way. And with the beauty, the internet, and with the apps, we have this remarkable opportunity today to actually go out and choose a partner if we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We have the opportunity not just to date the people who are in our closest circles, but to meet millions, to connect with millions of people. I would have never met Benjamin, never in a billion years. Our lives, the chances of our lives having our paths having crossed would have absolutely been zero to none when we were in Los Angeles, right? We were living 45 minutes to an hour apart, and the chances of our paths crossing would have been almost nil. So the internet helped connect us. It can help you connect with some wonderful people. Don't expect it to happen like that. Know that you may have to invest some time. Do not go into internet dating thinking that you're going to meet somebody immediately. It can happen, but more often than not, it really does take time. And be willing to go slow. Be willing to get to know people. Be willing to grow through this process so that you can open up more, so that you can make better connections and actually choose your next partner. So please go to lisashield.com, click the button to watch my free 45-minute presentation. Stay to the end if you'd like to talk to a member of my team or me about how you can participate in our 12-week emotionally naked dating program that Benjamin helps us with. He writes the profiles for the women, and he comes on all of our Q&A calls. So if you like these broadcasts, imagine what it would be like to work with us directly and learn even more. You will get so much further faster if you have coaching and support and a proven process for getting this solved. Also, please go to my YouTube channel and like it. Give us a thumbs up on Facebook or a heart. We love seeing that. And finally, just send us your topics and your suggestions to podcast@lisashield.com. You can also rate and like this podcast. We listen to all your comments and all your suggestions. If you like us, let us know. If you don't like us, let us know. I don't for a second think that everybody is going to love these broadcasts, but if you don't, let us know so we can make them better. If we're annoying you, we want to know that too. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Lisa Shield.
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
And this has been Getting Inside the Right Male Mind.
And if people have suggestions for podcasts.
Yes, I said, send it to podcast@lisashield.com.
Perfect.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.